Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric Series Emulation Night School, where I show you how to use some of the most popular emulators for PC, how to get them set up, how to get your controls working, and how to start playing some great games. And today I'm doing one that you guys have all been asking for recently. I'm going to show you how to set up Teknoparrot, but I need to be very clear about this. It is not going to be like any other Emulation Night School setup because pretty much every game it runs is going to have to be set up independently of every other game. This is not an emulator, it's more like a translation layer because it's running PC games and Linux games on your modern PC. Think more like Proton on a Steam Deck running Windows applications on Linux and anything else. And that means every single game is going to be dependent upon how you set it up. I'm going to give you all the tools to make it work for you, but you're going to have to do a little bit of paying attention on this one. Just trust me. And you'll see here Teknoparrot talks about the fact that it's a software package to allow you to run select PC-based arcade titles on your own hardware. That means that this is just translating things over. This is not like the concept of MAME, software emulation, where it's literally translating hardware into software code that'll run on your PC. This is just making PC executables run on pretty much any system, not the one target system that it was designed for. So I just want you to kind of change and pivot your thinking as far as that's concerned. And you will see here it runs a metric crap ton of different arcade PC boards, but it is not going to be all-encompassing. Teknoparrot has a lot of games, but make sure you check the list before you decide to install it, so if the one game you're thinking of isn't there, you haven't spent all that time. But there is a wide range of games for Teknoparrot. It's a very useful emulator, and it's definitely something I want to help you guys set up today. Just be aware, go through the compatibility page to make sure the game you want to run is working, and you may want to pop over to their Discord server as well because some of the patches are behind the Discord wall there. Honestly, it's one of those things you kind of have to be good at finding information to make Teknoparrot run exactly how you want it to. Now on the download page, you're going to see the DirectX end user runtimes from June 2010, as well as the Visual C++ redistributable runtime all in one. I want you to install both of those. They're both single-click installations. A lot of what Teknoparrot depends on is in those packages. And when you come to download here, you're going to go ahead and click the top download, the TP Bootstrapper. This is going to bring everything down onto your system. So go ahead and download that and put it in whatever folder you want. Teknoparrot doesn't really install as it does unpack. I've done a demo folder for this here. You'll see we have the tpbootstrapper.zip file, and go ahead and unzip that into whatever folder you created. This is going to bring the files down for Teknoparrot to basically bring every other file and asset it needs down for you to run these games once you install them. You can get rid of that zip once you're done, and you'll see in the folder we have tpbootstrapper.exe. You can go ahead and run this, and you'll set the directory as to wherever you want. This is where Teknoparrot's going to live. You don't really want to move it, so go ahead and select whatever directory you might want. For this instance, I'm just going to make another folder where I put TP Bootstrapper because this is a demonstration, but you pick on your system where you want to have Teknoparrot live. And if for any reason you get any sort of false positive on an antivirus check, you can set a folder exemption. I've been using this for a very long time. For the most part, it should be completely fixed now. It was a false positive that so reports were submitted in for, but if you do see that, go ahead and set the exemption. And you can just go ahead and click full install at the bottom right hand corner. That'll bring everything down you need. From there, we're moving into my main Teknoparrot installation. You will see Teknoparrot UI. That is the executable for Teknoparrot. And depending on how long it's been since you use this, you might see a notification at the top that updates are available. If you click the hamburger icon, at the top you'll see install updates. Even with new installations, there always seems to be a few things in the background that you do want to update. So you can go ahead and click update at the bottom right hand corner of the screen. It'll take somewhere between 30 seconds to 2 minutes depending on how much it needs to bring down. And you will see this window pop up. Just go ahead and let it run. Once everything is done, it'll just disappear and Teknoparrot will relaunch right where it used to be. And that is in real time right there. Now you'll see we have the Teknoparrot menu here. These are all the games that I've used Teknoparrot for to play or capture. When you install it, you're going to see nothing here whatsoever. The first place I want you to stop in is settings though. For the most part, everything is perfectly fine here, but I do recommend going to dark mode because honestly, the Teknoparrot UI in light mode, not the most attractive thing in the world. And if you are planning on using any sort of wheels for this, wheel and pedal sets for your PC, you want to go to the bottom right hand corner and download Force Feedback plugin. The global hotkeys you can set for whatever you want. Escape quits a game, that's all you really need to know. So go ahead and download the Force Feedback plugin if you want to use a wheel and pedal set for games like OutRun 2. From here you'll see on that hamburger menu we're going to have the most important icon, Add Game. This is where you're going to add any single game into Teknoparrot that it does work with. You'll see some of them say subscription. That means you have to have a Patreon key. I do not have one. You can decide what you want to do. And that's only because I released Akuma with my Discord for free and it ended up on Teknoparrot paid. It is a very useful piece of software, but I do have some feels. But that's totally fine. It is one of those things that always happens. But something like Akuma is just so much fun to play on Teknoparrot, but there is a host of other games that you can basically play here, and that is always going to be fun. Go ahead and scroll down and find the game you're looking for, and then when you do that, you'll see here, I've already added this one, but the game above it, Otoshu DX, no clue what that is. If this is the game you're looking to play, just go ahead and hit Add Game. All this is going to do is put it in your settings and launch directory. This is not bringing down any games. You're going to have to do that on your own. But you have to tell Teknoparrot basically everything you want it to do. And if there's any patch notes, you'll see them here when you select the game. Something like OutRun 2 requires some driver patches for AMD and NVIDIA GPUs, or else you're going to get a little bit of graphical corruption. So do read that menu every single time here. Something like Mario Kart Arcade GPDX, if you click that, you're going to first have to set where the game executable is. More often than not, Teknoparrot is going to tell you where that is, but sometimes you need to Google it. So if you click into the field there, you'll go ahead and navigate to wherever the folder is for the game that you downloaded, and you're going to go ahead and look for that executable. Here you'll see it. I'll go ahead and hit select, and Teknoparrot will now know where to find the game's launch files from, and I will give you the search terms for that Google in just a bit. The only other thing you really need to know so far is the overall input scheme. I always use X input, it always works for me, and I can't recommend enough for the non-racing and non-light gun games. Use an Xbox One X, use an Xbox Series X controller. Windows works perfectly fine with them, wired or wireless. It is my recommended controller, and it always works with Teknoparrot, where other controllers I found have a little bit of a binding issue. So you'll see here we're back in that menu. If we go over to something like OutRun 2, you'll see I have it set in X input as well. That is either for an analog controller or a wheel, depending on how I play. X input should basically be the de facto for you here. But when you open up any Teknoparrot game settings icon, you're going to have a bunch of different settings depending on what game you want to play. I'm going to go over racing games, I'm going to go over standard control games, I'm going to go over light gun games as well. For the most part, everything will always be selected as free play, so unless you actually want to coin up, I recommend you keep that on, and you can play in windowed or full screen, just depends on what you want to do. For pretty much any game that's a racing game, you're going to have wheel axis sensitivity as well as the pedal. So if you find your controller or wheel are too sensitive or not sensitive enough, you can adjust these here. And any game that will scale with whatever resolution you give it, you can type that in manually here. Just make sure you know that you adhere to the overall aspect ratio. 640 by 480 would be 4 by 3. If we do 1920 by 1080, we're in 16 by 9. And as far as OutRun 2 is concerned, you can dial it all the way up to 4K if you want. You'll see in some games you also have regions. Export's going to be English. If you pick Japan, you'd have a Japanese language support pack. If you pick USA, it's basically going to be the same thing as export. And if you really want to network these things up, you can, but that's going to be a step 2 in the tutorial. It's not in this video. And then from there, you can go ahead and click controller settings. You're going to have to bind the controls for every single game you play here. I'm doing this on the Xbox Series X controller right now just to explain to you how it works. You would do the exact same thing on a wheel. Click whichever button you want to bind and then hit the input on your controller or wheel of choice. For me, that's going to be the left thumbstick, the gas is going to be the left trigger, and the brake is going to be the right trigger, which would be incorrect as far as bindings. I'm just showing you that you can rebind them however you want. Once you're done binding all of the controls, you have to click Save Settings or else they will not adhere. So go ahead and pick whatever control config you want and go from there. Once you're ready to play the game, you can go ahead and hit Launch Game. That will load it up on your window. But say you want to play something like a light gun game, which is going to be a completely different set of controls. We'll get into that in just a moment, but if you do this correctly, you can play any racing game with a controller or a wheel, so long as it works on Windows 10 or Windows 11, because that's what this tutorial is predicated on, using a Windows-based PC. Now let's talk about binding the controls for games that are not racing games or light gun games, the stuff like shmups, the stuff like fighting games, anything like that. We're going to do Power Instinct 5 right here. You will see that you have the menu menu for all of the different button inputs, and you can go ahead and bind them from there. Just make sure that you look at something like an image so you know how many buttons a game has and you lay it out the way you want. The nice thing is, if it doesn't feel good, you can go right back into the binding menu and reset it. You're going to be doing this for every single game though, and that's what I want you to understand as far as this quote-unquote emulator is concerned. Every single title needs its own specific setup, and sometimes you're going to have to look that up, because I cannot go over 330 independent games here today. Now for a light gun game, you want to use raw input if you're going to use something like Gun for IR, Sendin, or anything else that emulates the mouse cursor. You can even use a mouse for this one if you want. So go ahead and either leave it on raw input or put it on raw input. This is going to allow you to use the mouse cursor to play light gun games on Teknoparrot. Then from there you're going to go into control setup. You're going to have to use some keys on the keyboard depending on how many buttons your gun has or your mouse has. You'll see here I'm just setting it up to use the mouse cursor, and I'm using my Gun for IR to bind the different buttons, the trigger and the left and right button for buttons within the game in and of itself. And I played with Gun for IR a ton on the channel. If you need any tutorials on the MiSTer side of things, I have those there as well. But it is my recommended light gun if you want to play Teknoparrot light gun games. It just works, it does a great job of emulating the mouse cursor, and it is the most responsive thing around no matter how you use it. So then you can play games like Aliens Armageddon here with the Gun for IR, just moving it left and right, holding down the trigger and the buttons like you would on a real arcade cabinet. You just need to make sure you're in raw input, and you need to bind the buttons correctly for the trigger and for any sort of other grenades you may want to use. And if you need more help with this, don't forget I have that $10 Patreon tier where you can get my support and chat features. And again, if you want to adjust the resolution, you can. Pretty much all of these games scale extremely effectively, and once you're done there, go ahead and hit save. And you'll see the gun is automatic by default. You should keep that the way it is. If you see that it's selecting the mouse on your actual system when you're trying to use Gun for IR or any other mouse cursor, you can just select it to be Windows mouse cursor, and that means whatever is moving on the screen for a mouse will be what Teknoparrot looks for. If you have any trouble, again, just let me know, but this should work perfectly fine for all of the light gun games out there, whether they're XY coordinate based or whether they are actually IR based. And just make sure that you go into the compatibility page and again look at the games you want to play first. There is a whole menu here you'll see from perfect to unplayable, and if you want to know if any game needs any patches, go ahead and select that game, because you'll see something like right here on OutRun 2 you do need those patches, so do check every single game. But if you do what I said in this tutorial, you'll be able to play every single Teknoparrot game that is available on the quote-unquote emulator but really translation layer. And if you run into any problems, you can let me know. But you guys asked for this one. If there's anything I missed, leave me a comment down below and I'll answer in the comments. But we're good to go on Teknoparrot. Go play it and have some fun. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.